So this story is called Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch loved flying around on her bushy brass broomstick. She would fly and fly, day and night. She would fly low and she would fly high. Sometimes she flew in straight lines. Sometimes she flew in circles. And when she was feeling particularly silly, she flew in zigzags. Now Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch also loved her big black and shiny silver-buckled shoes. Her mother, Motherella Zing Zong Curly Toes Witch, had given her beloved daughter, Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch, these special shoes when she was born. And they were so full of a mother's love and magic that they grew along with Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch, so she never ever had to find a bigger pair of magical shoes. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch also loved to fly fast with her hoary hair streaming out behind her, and to the side of her, and even sometimes in front of her, depending on which way the wild winds were whooshing. But one day, when Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch was flying fast right over the roof of Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre's crazy cornered castle, her Wildmane, that's another name for her hoary hair, got caught in her shoes and slid its strong strands through her shiny silvery buckles. The shiny silvery buckles on her marvellous magic shoes came undone and fell off her fine and dandy feet and clattered down on the rusty red roof of Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre's crazy cornered castle. Clatter, crash, clang went the shoes, making a clackety racket on the rusty red roof. Not only that, but because the red roof was so rusty, the marvellous magical shoes smashed right through the rusty red roof and hit Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre, right on his head. And sadly, this was the very day that Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre, had a terrifically terrible headache caused by a blistering bad toothache which had plagued him with pain all night. Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre, looked up at the huge hole in his rusty red roof. He couldn't believe his eyes. He thought a speedy space rock must have zipped and zoomed down through his roof. But no, there was the culprit, or should I say culprits, lying innocently on the blue blankets of his bed. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch sadly and sorrowfully looked down through the hole in the rusty red roof and smiled sweetly at Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre. "So sorry," she said, "my shoes slipped." And she dropped down gently through the hole right onto Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre's blue blankets, preparing to pick up her silvery buckled shoes and slip silently out the window with them. "I'm so sorry," she said again. "My shoes fell off as I was flying over your castle. May I please have them back?" And she smiled sweetly again. But Orifice Shemozzle, the ogre, had other ideas. He roared right into Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane's right ear. "No," he shouted. "No, that is not going to happen," he yelled. "You are not going to get these shoes back just like that." And he clutched them tightly in his oversized ogre hands. "I've been awake all night with a terrible toothache and a horrible headache, and now your silly shoes have hit my head so hard I have a large lump on my head and more pain. No, you are not going to get these silly shoes back until you have carried out a taxing task for me. You must earn these silly shoes back." Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch looked suddenly sheepish. She hung her head low. Clutching her marvellous magic shoes even tighter, Orifice the ogre waved and wagged his finger at her. "You can have your silly shoes back on 2 conditions, he said. "What conditions?" asked Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch. "First," said the ogre, "you must find the highest tree in my castle grounds, and second, you must climb up to the very top of that tree." "Okay," said Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch, "but why can't I just fly up to the top of the tallest tree?" "Because," said Orifice Shemozzle the ogre, "because you must leave your witchetty broomstick right here with me for safe keeping." Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch was worried. She had never been without her bushy brass broomstick before, not since she'd been a very tiny baby. It had also been a gift from her mother, Motherella Zing Zong Curlytoes Witch, and it too had grown along with her. But she could see that the ogre was determined, and she could see that she'd better comply with his conditions if she ever wanted to get her marvellous magic shoes back. "All right," finally she said, "I will find the highest tree in your castle grounds, and I will climb up to the top. Then will you give me back my shoes and return my broomstick?" "Yes," said Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre, and he reached out and grabbed Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch's broomstick, knocking her to the ground. She picked herself up and climbed down a crazy creeper that was growing from the very bottom to the top of the ogre's crazy-cornered castle. Behind her, the ogre pulled down the blinds of all the castle windows. "Now no one can disturb me," he muttered to himself. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch knew exactly where to find the tallest tree in the castle grounds because she had flown over it many times. She had to walk slowly and carefully because she was barefoot and the ground was covered with sharp, flinty stones. Finally she reached the tree. She had never climbed up a tree before, so it took her some time to work out how to grasp the growing branches and pull herself up from one branch to another. At last she reached the top. "Now I will get my marvellous magic shoes and my bushy brass broomstick back from that ogre," she thought. She felt happy and hopeful again. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch called out to Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre. "Mr. Ogre, I'm at the top of the tallest tree in your castle grounds," she called, but there was no reply from the ogre. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch couldn't even see him because he had pulled down dark blinds at all the castle windows and all the doors were shut tight. "Now what am I going to do?" she thought. Just then a fluffy brown squirrel popped out of a hole in the tree trunk just near where Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch was. Now I know you're wondering what the squirrel's name is, so I'll tell you. The squirrel's name is Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel. "Hello," he said. "What are you doing at the top of the tallest tree? You're a witch. Why aren't you flying around on your broomstick like other witches instead of sitting here in this tree?" So Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch told Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel all about how Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre had taken her bushy brass broomstick and also her marvellous magic shoes and wouldn't give them back. He had, in fact, played a nasty trick on her, she was ashamed to admit. Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel thought for a minute and a second. "I have an idea," he said. "You said that the ogre has a terrible toothache which has given him a horrible headache and he can't stand noise." "Yes," said Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch. "Well," said the squirrel, "will you use some of your magic to make me a massive sack?" "Certainly," said the witch, "with pleasure, but why?" "I'll be right back," said Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel, and he disappeared down the tree trunk. While he was gone, Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch chanted the magical incantation for her special sack-making spell. And just as the sack appeared, so did Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel. But he was not empty-handed. He had with him his summer stash of hard nuts, which he was saving for winter. "Help me fill up the sack," he said, and the witch and the squirrel filled the sack to the brim with hard, noisy nuts. "Now," said Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel, "please cast another spell so that we can carry this sack full of noisy nuts up onto the roof of the ogre's castle." Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch cast another one of her special secret spells, and soon she and the squirrel were poised on either side of the sack full of nuts up on the rusty red roof of the castle, but far enough away from the hole so that neither of them will fall through. "Ready?" said the squirrel. The witch nodded. They both took out a handful of noisy nuts and dropped them loudly down onto the roof. Clang, clatter, crash! Clang, clatter, crash! Went the noisy nuts. Then above the noise of the nuts they both heard a roar, the loudest roar they had ever heard. It was coming from Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre. He was upset at all the noise made by the noisy nuts raining down on the rusty red roof of his castle. It was making his headache worse and worse. He couldn't stand it. He shouted out loudly, "Stop that noise at once!" "No," said Squintillian Squish Squash Squirrel and Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch together, and they dropped a barrage of noisy nuts down on the roof. Clang, clatter, crash. Clang, clatter, crash went the noisy nuts. They clattered and clanged and clashed, even louder than they had before, as they bounced all over the rusty red roof, setting up exciting echoes all through the castle walls and all through the ogre's throbbing head. "Why won't you stop?" shouted Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre, as he held his heavy head in his hands. "Because you won't give the witch back her shoes and broomstick," squeaked Squintillian Squirrel. "Will you stop that racket if I do?" asked the ogre. "Yes," said the squirrel and the witch together. So Orrible Orifice Shemozzle the ogre climbed out of his window and carefully put Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch's marvellous magic shiny silvery buckled shoes and her bushy brass broomstick out on the balcony, and then he went back inside to rest his heaving head. Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch carefully put on her marvellous magic shiny silvery buckled shoes and picked up her bushy brass broomstick. Then she said a special secret spell to collect up all of Squintillian Squirrel's hard and noisy nuts, and flew them all back to the tallest tree so the squirrel could bury them again. And do you know that from that day to this, Squintillian Squirrel has never ever run out of nuts and has never ever gone hungry? Do you think that could be because of Warmarella Ping Pong Wildmane Witch? I do. So, I've been reading you stories from my new book, ZIG ZAG ZOG, and you can check out all my books on my website, which is www.g'daysally.com. This is the G'day Sally Show, and the G'day Sally Show is brought to you by Noa. You know, Hawaii is a microcosm of the world with people here from all over the world, and Noa Hawaii is a microcosm of the traditional arts of the world with beautiful patterns from many countries. They've been in business for 38 years with wonderful Hawaii designed batik clothing. Their hand-dyed and handmade clothes have patterns that are based on traditional kapa and tapa designs from Hawaii, Polynesia, Micronesia, Indonesia, even New Zealand and Africa. So check out all of the wonderful items that Noa has on their website, which is www.noanoahawaii.com. So I'll be back next week, so bye for now.